Welcome back to the Watchung Booksellers podcast, where we bring you conversations from our bookstore's rich community of book professionals who talk about a different aspect of the book world. And if you're new to our podcast, thanks for joining us. I'm Marnie, and I'm here with my co-producer, Catherine. Hey, Catherine. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Marnie?
Great. What are you reading?
Well, I just picked up Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. It's about a young woman who gets pregnant by her community college professor, and she decides to have the baby, and she is trying to make ends meet, and so she starts an OnlyFans. And it's kind of funny because I didn't know what that was, and my kids got to tell me, and so that made for an interesting conversation. What about you? What are you reading?
I just actually got an arc of The Original Daughter. It's a debut novel by Jemima Way. It comes out next year. I believe it's May of 2025 by Doubleday Books. And it's contemporary fiction. I'm really looking forward to reading it.
Very cool, very cool. So that is a nice segue into discussing how we get the books we get in our bookstore. You found an ARC, which is an advanced reader's copy, but how did that ARC show up? And it showed up because we have amazing sales reps who come to our store and meet with us and tell us what is coming up from the publishing end, and then we get to buy what we like, and then we sell it on through to everyone else. Today we are talking with Maddie, our store owner, and Ashanti White-Wallace, who sells us titles from Norton.
Yeah, Ashanti White-Wallace has been the New York City and tri-state area sales rep for W.W. Norton, Inc. since January 2020. Originally from a small mountain town, she graduated with distinction from the University of Colorado at Boulder, where she majored in English, studio arts, and art history. She found her passion for slinging books at Boulder Book Store in 2008. After attending the Columbia Publishing course, she managed inventory for the Whitney Museum of American Art and Word in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and Jersey City, New Jersey. Ashanti runs at JC Queer Book Club in Jersey City.
Yeah, and Maddie Ciliotta-Young is the owner and operator of Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, New Jersey. Maddie grew up in Montclair and at the bookstore with her mom, Margot. After college, she was a teacher and principal for over a decade at a New York City public high school. As a school administrator, Maddie had a focus on equity for underserved schools and a passion for teaching literacy. She joined the Watchung Booksellers team in 2022, and when she's not in the stores, she can be found enjoying Montclair's restaurants with her husband or on the soccer field cheering on her kids.
Enjoy the conversation, and we'll be back after to fill you in on what's coming up in the store.
All right. Well, hi, Ashanti.
Hi, Maddie.
I'm Maddie. I am the owner-operator of Watchung Booksellers. And Ashanti, if you want to introduce yourself and your role.
Yeah, I am the New York City and tri-state area sales rep for W.W. Norton, and I have been since January 2020, which we will get into.
Yeah, what that looks like.
Very interesting time to transition into publishing. But I was a bookseller for many years before that, like about 15 years before that.
Yeah, and were you in Denver? What store were you at?
Yeah, I started at Boulder Book Store in Boulder, Colorado, and then got headhunted eventually, actually, by Christine Onorati.
Oh, yes.
Whom I am forever grateful to for literally changing my life by getting me out on the East Coast. And I was there doing inventory management, backlist buying, and then eventually GMing for both stores in Brooklyn and Jersey City. I spent a couple years at the Whitney Museum, also doing the same thing, inventory management, which museum buying is really interesting. It's very different than bookstore buying. It's like much closer to like an event model of buying because you're buying for a specific time period that will
like for the exhibit
switch over
and then you just move on to other so you have quite the background. So you've been on the buying side as a bookseller,
yes,
and then also now you're on the selling side,
yes.
So how did you transition to Norton, and why did you decide then to do that? Like, it's just a little bit of a switch.
I love bookselling. I love everything about bookselling. It is also retail, so it can be difficult on your body and your mind after a certain time point. And I just felt like it was time for me to transition into something that I had been interested in for a really long time. Actually, I did one of the publishing programs. I did the Columbia Publishing course in 2013, formerly the Radcliffe Publishing course. And I actually have one in Oxford now. And, you know, I would encourage any booksellers who are interested in that to like reach out and talk to Shay Earhart, who is amazing. She is like so well connected in the community, but also extremely gracious. And I got pretty close to a full ride to go.
Oh, great.
Because of my bookselling background.
Like just like grants and things available.
Yeah,
to you.
they had scholarships available, which I don't think a lot of people know about the Columbia Publishing courses, that they do have scholarships available. It's not something I would have been able to do on my own, and that was really key to being able to come out here. And it was actually through making connections with other classmates that I learned about the job at Word in the first place.
Right. Yep.
And Christine liked to hire people from other well-regarded indies in the industry.
Right, yeah.
But I think it worked out very well for both of us for, you know, a good while. But yeah, I had been an assistant buyer at the Boulder Book Store for like 2 years at that point, and I had done basically every role except for events handling.
Okay, yeah.
I was like a consistent key holder. Yep. I would close the store every like Friday and Saturday night, kick drunk people out. And,
sorry, no more books.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you guys are buying books
Don't have to go
anywhere.
home, but you gotta get out of here.
You have to leave now. Yeah. I need to go home and study. Thank you.
Which people wouldn't think happen at bookstores, but like in those city bookstores that are open late, I'm sure, I mean, people just hang out.
People do.
Who doesn't want to hang out in a bookstore?
Yeah. And we were on a walking mall, so it was like, you know, there's many pubs across the street.
Yep, exactly.
It was just,
well, now they have bookstore, like bar bookstores, right? There's like the one in, where is it? In the Bronx? Is it the Lit Bar?
The Lit Bar, and
something else downtown.
Liz's Book Bar just opened in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And there's also Book Club Bar.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that one. Yep.
Yes, that's in with a lot of my like Lower East Side.
Yes, that's the one downtown. Yeah.
Stores.
Yeah. So it's a thing to be drunk in a bookstore.
It's a thing now.
That's a normal thing. And what did you, so like Norton is really, to me, the like very intellectual publisher, right? Like there's more interesting titles, there's more unique topics. There are bestsellers at Norton, but it's not just like pumping out New York Times list books. It's like, feels very intentional, the types of books that are published by WW. And it's a smaller publisher than.
Yeah. The cool thing about Norton that not everyone knows is that we are employee owned. We're the only like large employee owned independent publisher in the country.
I did not know that.
After you work there a certain number of years, you can start buying stock in the company, which is really great. And a lot of people do that, and it's not publicly traded. So it really is a very like special, close held thing. And I think that really helps direct some of our publishing program too, because the thing that I hear most consistently from my buyers is that there isn't anything that is not a lasting book of quality on the list. And to people outside of the industry, I describe it as like, we publish the prize winners. Like we have a lot of Pulitzer, National Book Award. A lot of our books get a lot of prizes. So it is a very prestigious house.
Yes.
We just celebrated our 100th anniversary too.
Yeah,
which is
congratulations.
Really cool. Yeah. And I just, honestly, I was always kind of a nerd about like the industry specifically. Yeah. And when I got into it and started to see like how so many publishers like do things in this really cattywampus way, that's I think when I decided to really make the transition from book selling to publishing. Because of course my arrogance, I thought I can do it better.
You'll fix it all. Yeah, so like did you look exclusively at Norton? Were you like, I'm gonna work there, this is where I belong? Or did you kind of, you know, have interest in other publishing houses?
Honestly, no, because I am a bit of a weird reader. I'm the horror reader in our sales group.
Which I want to get to, because you always have such good insights into like some of the weirdest books. I'm like, tell me about this.
Yes. Yeah, I'm drawn to the weird books. I triple majored in college, which actually was very useful for publishing, actually, because it is kind of just like being in college all the time and just reading, you know, weird random stuff. Yeah. One of my majors was art history, so that also really helps with our art lists. You know, we distribute Thames and Hudson and Abbeville, which are really huge art publishers. And we'll soon have Yale and Harvard. And Yale with their painting school is, you know, a really important art publisher. And they do a lot of museum co-pubs. So it's actually...
and then there's your museum museum connection there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it all kind of melds together in that way.
And I mean, a book has such a long life before it even gets to a reader, right?
Yeah.
Your typical customer reader. Book selling is not the sexiest, like you said, it's retail, right? Like, we're just like, it's just a lot of like selling books, saying good morning. Retail. Yeah, saying good morning, moving boxes from one place to another. But I find that like the funnest part is the buying. Like it's shopping to me. I'm like, oh my God, I get to go shopping. And you also get to be a shopper or a personal shopper for your customers. You're not just shopping for yourself for your own bookshelf. But by the time it even gets to me as a buyer at a bookstore, it's already like I feel like the book has had months and months of life.
Yeah.
So, like, where do you start as the sales rep? So it's like, I'm an author. I'm writing a book. I get an agent who gets me a contract with Norton. And then what? Like, then where does it go?
Well, I just want to pause very briefly and say that I have so much admiration for bookstore owners because I have a little bit of an insight into how difficult it is and also especially like the buying process. It's not an easy process. Yep. And our list is usually about 300, now going to be about 450 books a season.
Right.
Which is 3 times a year.
Right.
And our list is not even the largest out of a lot of the lists.
It's actually very manageable, I find. Like, we meet monthly, but there's some that come through that are 1,200 books. And I do a lot of the kids buying for certain publishers. Like with you, I do kids and adult buying. And then it's like 2 catalogs that are 1,100, 1,200 books per season. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot. Like, there's a lot out there. And there's also a lot that, like, don't make it to a publisher, right? There's a lot of books that are hybrid or self-published.
Yes.
So there's just, like, so much content, even in the book world. Like, we're not even talking about the internet, but just, like, there's so much out there.
Just for books published.
Yes.
Yeah. There's an insane amount of content to sift through. And I actually do have a lot of buyers who tell me that my insight is invaluable. And, of course, that's, like, a nice ego boost. But, they do need someone who is an expert on the list, on their publisher's list to say, okay, these are the things that are going to work for your store specifically too.
Yep.
Because not every book is going to work for every store.
No,
and that's just the reality of it. And that's an okay thing. But to go back to how a book starts, once they have the contract, that's usually after the product is like rough form.
Like it's a manuscript at that point, right?
It can be as much as a full manuscript. It can be as little as like, here's a 40-page proof of what I'm going to do.
Interesting.
And it really depends on like the author's track history, if they've published anything before, you know. That really happens with more, I think, more established. Right. But like, it also just depends on the author's style. Like, I'm reading something right now for April 2025. Yeah. It's Russell Shorto. It is going to be awesome because it's about the Dutch colonial history of New York City.
Ooh, yeah.
It's going to be a really cool book. He had the full manuscript in January of this year.
Oh,
so,
wow.
like, because he's written so many books and is, like, established at this, I think it's easier for him to have this full product and say, here's my full product. Yeah. It's also a continuation of research that he's been doing for decades. Yeah. So it's like...
Yeah, and he knows how to put it together. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then it goes to an editor, right? I mean, like, and sometimes, like, you must be brought in sometimes because it's like books, you know, yes, it is for the art of it, right? But also books have to be sellable.
They do.
Right? And so, like, where does that check come in?
Honestly, sometimes as early as we're getting this proposal from this agent, do you think this would work for your market?
Right.
Especially if it's like a New York-centric book.
Right. If it's not going to sell in the New York stores, is this... like,
then it's not
worth it.
Gonna sell. Yeah. And that's not being New Yorkist about it. Right?
Yeah, which we can be a little bit. But
we could be. But, like, that's the same thing, like, if there was a Detroit author and they would tap my colleague Dave Malman and be like, you know, is this for the stores up there?
Right.
Or, like, is this going to sell at their Chicago, but some co-op, you know? It's just really the same thing. Like, is it going to sell at your big bellwether stores offers. If not, then
then we have to. Yeah.
Although usually when they bring a proposal to my attention, they are seriously considering it. So it's not like
because at this point, then you're bringing multiple eyes are on this book.
Yes.
Right. People are spending time on it. So you might check in with the book while it's with an agent or an editor before it's even in contract, and then the editor kind of starts to go through it with the author.
Yes.
Back and forth. What interests me the most is like what happens at the table when so now you're reading what, April 2025 books?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm a little bit behind. I should be reading summer 2025 stuff already.
Okay, so like that would be your next big sales meeting is like the summer catalog.
Yes, and we're meeting for that end of October.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. See, you're way ahead of even where we are.
Yeah. So, like, when a book honestly hits the shelves, sometimes it's been, I've already sold it months in advance of it hitting the shelves. And I kind of forget about its existence until we start to get, like, good publicity for it or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that book. Yeah, I love that book.
The review comes out like a week before the book is published, but you read it or dealt with it 16 months prior.
Yes. And I'm sure booksellers know this too, but like when something gets put on an awards list, it's just like, forget about it. Like,
then it's gone.
You can't get it. You better hope that you had it before it gets on the awards list.
Or any New York Times list.
Yes.
At all. I mean, for us anyway, we're like big New York Times list readers.
Yeah, so you have to do like a lot of forecasting, and that's also where your rep comes into play with helping you do that kind of forecasting.
And so like you can't read everything. So you're at a table with like how many reps are really like is the whole country represented at the table when you get like are all the reps across the US for Norton meeting together, or are you just kind of like
so like we have different sales channels. So I am in the independent bookstore sales channel.
Yeah.
And, we do not serve the Evil A. We do not serve B&N. We do not serve, like, the Newport, Hudson News stores.
Yeah.
Those are their own sales channel. We know all those people and we're friendly with them.
Yeah, but those are whole separate reps for those types of,
Yeah, they're entirely separate reps. Yeah. Honestly, the Norton sales team is also kind of small. We have, I think, including me, 8 right now. We all cover multiple states.
Right, yeah.
My territory is pretty large, but we all meet once a week.
Oh, yeah, that's often.
We like each other.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, when there's 8 of you, that's nice.
Yeah. So we do a meeting over video chat.
Yeah.
I don't want to buzz market the video chat service, but
right, yeah, exactly.
But we meet over video chat once a week and just like discuss things that are going on or upcoming or, things are always changing too in, not just in publicity, but like certain things will happen that you need to be like proactive in what you're going to do about them. Yeah. So those meetings are invaluable.
Like March 2020. What was that meeting like? Right? Because I heard from a lot. I didn't come into bookselling until after that. I was still running a school at that point. And I heard that there were all of these lags, kind of. Like there was just this one season when I came on in 2022 where people were still feeling the effects of not having manuscripts coming through or not being able to even physically print anything because of all of the, supply chain issue. I wish I would never say the word supply chain ever again.
Yeah, that was
And then it kind of was like, there was just like this little gap where people were like, there should be more coming out this season, but there's not, like, we're still feeling the effect. So like, it's like how are decisions made then about what goes out?
And there were so many good books that came out in 2020 that just like had no chance.
Right.
Like no chance whatsoever. Like bookstores weren't even open to be able to allow people to browse for a good part of the year. But like the really weird thing was we had a sales conference end of February 2020.
Wow. Yeah.
And, we're in New York. They fly all the sales reps out for the conference. Yeah. And like the 3rd or 4th day, they start to like sanitize the microphones.
Right. Yeah. That was already.
Okay, this is going to be a more serious thing than we think it is. And it dramatically changed the way the sales reps do our jobs. Yeah. Because like I have a coworker who his territory is so large, he was only home like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks out of the season.
Wow.
The rest of the time he was on the road, traveling, and, selling the list in person.
Right, yeah.
Which is how it had been done, essentially since the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like traveling salespeople. Really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I still do some of, and we all still do some of, but it is much less of a huge part of our job than it was before, and we have been able to move our workload in more efficient ways. A lot of the time we had what our sales director, Stephen Pace, calls windshield time, and he wanted to get us doing something other than windshield time because it's not useful for anyone.
Right.
It's not useful for the person traveling. It's not useful for the booksellers.
Right.
It's not giving them anything extra. And I actually have some accounts now who are like, I'll never meet a rep in person again. This is just so much easier to go through the list that way. And you know what? That's fine with me because my whole job is making things easier for my accounts because I know how difficult their job is.
Yeah.
So any way anyone wants to do it, honestly, I'm like, I'm flexible. I can't even believe that this is a job sometimes that, I'm expected to go and just do like mini book reports with people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We just talk on the phone and you give me a book report.
Yeah.
And and it's the calls are really flexible for me too because the amount of times that I have to like cancel and I always feel bad if somebody's like coming out for something and I'm like, oh my God,
it's much easier to reschedule when we have like a regular meeting where we know we're going to talk to each other eventually and sometimes life happens and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It works. Yeah. And so do you have more time to read then? Like what's your new windshield time?
I do have more time to read. Monthly selling does take a lot of, and it's an innovation that only we're doing.
Right, yeah.
As far as the publishing houses. And I think it is because our list is so nimble that we're able to do this. But it really helps a lot, and it helps with something that I'm especially fond of, which is backlist buying. I love backlist. And it's like, you cannot overemphasize the long tail economics of a book, which, of course, if anyone hasn't read long tail, please read the long tail. It is so important. I actually have like a book list that I recommend for people starting bookstores.
Oh, that's helpful.
Why we shop.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm going to write this down real quick.
The long tail. Mathematics for Bookselling, which is a little bit out of date now because it was written pre-Edelweiss, our ordering software, but it explains turns and returns and how you should think about your inventory flow in a really smart way. And this is a surprising one, but Bookselling for Dummies.
Yes. Everything for Dummies is great.
Yeah, it really is, actually. A lot of people that I worked with are interviewed for that book.
Oh, so great.
It's just leading industry voices, talking about it. And, of course, other econ books are useful, but,
general
feel like
business.
Yes, but if you want to just start a bookstore, like I feel like that will give you such a good, just round picture of the industry.
Yeah, and I think so we meet monthly, and so now we're buying. Like I'm bought up with Norton through October, right? So. Our next meeting is going to be November, December books.
I think we did November, December books, January. Actually. So January.
Yeah.
We're
so right now,
January.
the next catalog will go through January, February. Yeah. And so some of the other publishers that I meet with, gosh, I think also January. I think I'm starting to meet now, but their catalogs then are January through, I think maybe May. Or it's like all spring.
And it's those 1,200 book catalogs that we were talking about.
Yeah. And so it's like the catalog now it's electronic through Edelweiss. And so it comes to me with all of the books ever that are coming out in that time span. And then I really have to rely on you guys. I mean, you're able to make suggestions electronically and you can put in, well, I think this would work. I think you should definitely get at least 6 of this or whatever, But I do really rely on, like you said, to put it simply, your book reports. Like, especially like the art books, like how many times are we going through them? And I'm like, who is this? What is this? And I just say, like, Ashanti, is this important?
Yes.
Do I need to have, I don't know. And I'm not going to ever open that book, right? Like I'm not going to necessarily go through it. And you have all of this background knowledge and all this context for everything that like I could not possibly have. And even we have multiple buyers at our store. I mean, I'm not the only one who does the buying. Like we have somebody who looks at all our mysteries and cookbooks and someone who looks at our sci-fi. And so typically they read the most in those sections. But I mean, even like, I don't know, I think we have like 18,000 books in our tiny little store. We did not read all of those.
It's impossible.
It's
actually
really
an
is. I don't know
task.
if people understand the like massive amount of books that we have. And those are constantly changing too, because new books are coming out and we hang on to some of the older books if we think they're important and return some. But it really, like when we go through a list, I'm like, I mean, like I remember, what was it? Was it the octopus book? And I was like, do we need another octopus book? Because we already had one that was a bestseller, and then like, do we need this other one? And you were like, well, actually, and you just like went out on this like full report about like the creature, and I'm like, oh my god, how does she know all of this stuff about everything? But I do really depend on that.
I also
as
have
a buyer.
Special like obsession with octopuses.
It sounds like maybe also a personal passion. But it's like helpful to have that other brain on all of these books, because like you said, your list is probably one of the more manageable ones, and I still could not possibly. And like I'm very nonfiction phobic. Like I really,
a lot of people are.
And so
Even
that I
great
really
stuff.
There's such good stuff, and I will not pick it. I just like, I know myself, and so that I really rely on the reps for. I'm like, you got to tell me, because I do not want to chase a book that like all of a sudden is a bestseller and like I only ordered 2 and can't get any more of it because everybody else has it.
I feel like
right?
such a failure when that happens, and it like inevitably happens.
So disappointing. And and then, I mean, this is
like,
part of the fun part about buying is you do have to take a gamble. And you, like you said, you're forecasting. You're like thinking this is going to do really well. And hoping it's going to do really well.
And when we're saying do really well, like I think it's also important to emphasize this is from a sales perspective.
Right.
Like I am a salesperson above everything else. The books are units. I want the units to move. We may love them and cherish them, but they still need to perform in real sales terms in the store to earn a place in your, what I presume is fairly expensive square footage.
Real estate. It's real estate in our store to have a book out.
A book takes up space, and it's important that, so when we're talking about something like Turns, we're talking about how many times it sells in its spot, and if it's actually worth its spot.
It's true. All of that is measured, and it really is like, there's so many books that I love and that I'm learning now, like this does not necessarily have broader appeal for our audience. Like I'm not, like I love this book, and I'm probably just going to sell one. And I need to be okay with that. And there's also, when I'm going through these catalogs, I am also scanning. I have, one customer in mind that I'm like, oh my God, she loves this particular type of historical fiction, or he's going to be really interested in like anything like Eastern European themed fiction or nonfiction. Sometimes I am like personal shopping for some of our regular customers. I'm like, what would this one particular customer like to read?
That's where the reps really lean.
Perfect.
On your expertise and your knowledge of your community to make sure that we're getting it right. Because bookselling is also one of the only industries that you can return products.
Exactly.
And so, even though it is one of the greatest gifts of publishing and also Depression era.
That was a part of,
it is still something that like, we don't want to see a ton of returns back in our warehouse.
And we don't want to do it. I mean, we don't want to do it. We have to take somebody off of the floor for the day. Right? To pull the books, to scan them back out. Like it's a lot, like we're putting a lot into the labor of it. Plus the shipping. Right? Then we're paying for shipping here and back, or,
It makes that unit, and I like, this is something that when I was a GM, I would tell people so many times, like, think about how many times you're touching that book. Because every time you're touching that book, its cost is going up by a couple cents. Of course, like, you amortize that and, look at it big picture at the end of everything. But, like, sometimes it is like you're paying for that book 2 or 3 times over when you have to return it. So
exactly.
It's really important to get it right.
It is. It really is. And you want to have enough on hand so that as many people as possible find their book.
Yes.
Right? So there's a breadth of books that you have to have. And then also like the depth, like we said, how many units are going to go.
Yes.
Because you do not want to get stuck with your pants down after Thanksgiving at any point, right?
No. That's when the gamble like starts to pay off and also starts to get very hairy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, what are some things you think about when you think about the personality of a bookstore? I mean, like, you worked at 2 bookstores, so, like, you understand how bookstores run. But as someone selling to stores, like, what are some of the things you're considering about us to present to me? Like, you know, it's like we do go through the catalog, and there's some books that you're like, nope, skip. Like, you don't even need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
You don't need that. Or, like, maybe you want to try one. What are you thinking about Watchung Booksellers when you, like, what are the things you consider?
I think size is first and foremost one of the things that I'm considering. Like, what is the square footage of the space that I'm selling to? How much of that square footage is going to be Norton? We're not quite one of the big 5, so I don't expect us to have the same... I won't say I don't expect us to have quite the same footprint because all of our books are so good.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there is some like proportion to it, right? Like if you're if you're not selling us out of 1,000 books, then you might not have the same. But some of your books are so important.
Yeah, I was starting to go down that road, but I have had some buyers this season, especially. I'm going into fall because we have some like really big books on the fall season that have told me that their buys are as big as their Penguin order for the season.
Right. Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, they have Penguin Random House has a domineering market share. So to hear something like that is exciting. And
it's good for the little guy.
Yes. And it means we're on the right track with what we're doing. So in terms of how I think of specific stores, like I do have one of the first things that I did when I became a rep was I used Google Maps and I put a pin in every single store that I sell to so that I can look at my territory and see a visual representation of it. I mean, like I'm a very visual person anyways. And then I kind of like mentally break it down into areas. So like everything that is within about half an hour of the city still kind of buys like a New York City store.
Right. Yeah.
Because they have a lot of people who live out here in bedroom communities, but work in New York. They have kind of the same or a similar profile to a New York City shopper.
Right.
And then when you get into the city, you have to start thinking about specific neighborhoods because of how New Yorkers can be so relegated to their blocks and their like specific little areas. And you can see crazy micro trends there too.
Yeah.
So I would say that you guys, I do kind of think of you as like a hybrid of suburban and urban, a little more urban, a little more literary. Of course, I consider your children's location and expansion as a big thing since you guys invested this real estate space into it. So, of course, it's going to be a big part of your business plan and not something to be ignored.
Yep, exactly.
And yeah, I just assume that your readers want from me smart nonfiction, approachable nonfiction and fiction, but that is still going to make them think.
Yes. That sounds pretty spot on.
That's what I would probably. Yeah. And then also, you know, again, the kid stuff not to be overlooked at all. And we have kind of a new imprint, Norton Young Readers. They have been around since 2019. We published Rex Ogle, and we have a new Rex Ogle on this next list that is a novel in verse, which is very, popular for YA right now. So that'll be good. We have this like series that's Dave Eggers sponsored that is like with one of his programs that's ordinary young people in extraordinary circumstances. Accused is one of them. It's a young woman. She was like 12 when 9/11 happened, and she is Muslim. And so she's writing about the experience of Muslim Americans after 9/11. And, you know, another young man who lived through a hurricane in Puerto Rico and actually did a lot for his community in the immediate aftermath to help. So just kind of like to show young people that they can also make a difference. And we all live through history regardless of age.
Yeah, because I'm sure there are stores that, maybe overlook I mean, again, it's like number one thing is real estate. Like, how much space do you have? And I'm sure if you
don't want to overpack them.
Yeah, our kids section was so packed that there were so many things you couldn't see because of the way that we had to shelve it. There was just like very limited display space for kids stuff.
And then you find people browsing get scared to browse.
Right, yes, because they don't want to have
packed.
to shove it back in the wrong place, and then it would just become such a mess so easily. And then when we first moved to the new kid space, everybody was like, oh my God, look at all these new books. Like, you guys really like stepped it up. And I was like, oh, we actually haven't ordered anything new yet at all.
We just have space.
We've
for it
had
now.
this, but now you can see it. It really, so many customers commented on what a great selection we had. And I was like, we're not getting anything new until September. We literally just brought this over from the other store.
We can face some things out now.
Exactly.
So
It's like now what the picture book actually looks like. And so to us the kid stuff is really, really important now in a different way. It was really, really important to be so selective before.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's really, really important to
you can gamble.
have some fun, maybe, right? And just take a chance, on some books. So that's exciting.
I do just really quickly want to go back to the whole book process.
Yeah.
So just very briefly, we get a manuscript.
Yep.
We read it
Yep.
pretty early. We actually have several conferences about it. We have a pre-sales conference where we meet, and it's like the editors are introducing it, handing it off to
the
for the
sales
first
team.
time. When they're going, here's my baby. What do you think of my baby? With all of the loaded feelings that come with
Yes. Yeah.
here's my baby. What do you think of my baby?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I've raised this child. Now judge it.
But it still has to perform, right? So the first pre-sales conference is when we can really get our opinions in and say, okay, what kind of cover are you thinking about this? Or this title doesn't work for us. Or this title is going to have this disambiguation because of XYZ other book that's out right now. Or you have these keywords, and those keywords are going to obscure it in this specific retailer.
Right. Yeah.
So we need you to think of different keywords, or that's also when we'll question BISAC.
Yes, all that,
which is also really important to give to the buyers to where does this fit?
Right, yeah, what are all of the categories that this could possibly, because every store is different. We put mystery and thriller together, we put sci-fi and fantasy together. Some stores don't.
Yeah.
We used to have romance with just general fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many books that are genre bending. And
Yes.
It's like, okay, but then how do you want us to sell this? Like, what is the best pitch and who's the ideal reader for this?
Yes.
And that's where we're going to put it, is where that reader is going to shop.
And find it.
In our store. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, you won't be there to hand sell every book. And I can hand sell to you with all of my vigor and enthusiasm for whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if it can't stand alone as a product, then those efforts are a little bit
then
wasted.
it doesn't go anywhere.
So when we get to the actual sales conference, the item, the manuscript and everything, the book as the object is fairly set.
You can see the cover design and...
For the most part, most of the covers are in there. And we actually are always learning. I'm always learning about publishing because I've only been in it for 5 years. We had a session, I don't know, 6 months ago where we hung out with all the art department.
Oh, cool.
And we're like, how do you guys do this? Like, what do you do? And the art director gave us a rundown. And they do a significant amount of reading as well, where they will get the manuscript handed over to them, and they'll take just like 2 or 3 weeks reading the books that they're working on to try and get the right vibe, because it's not always a literal translation of what are they talking about in the book to the cover. Yeah.
Then it gets to the store. It's on the shelf. It's on the table. What are some runaway surprises that you've had that you were like, whoa, I had no idea that would do so well?
Oh, Jessie Sheehan Snackable Bakes.
Yeah.
Was a runaway surprise.
There's always, for me, it's like all of the nature, but birding books do so well in Montclair. And I just didn't think birding was such a thing. My mother-in-law does it, but it's a thing. And then so many of those nature books, I'm like, how many single animal
Yes.
books can we possibly have? And yet they
Which
do.
many of those are mine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, how many octopus books? And yet, yeah, they always surprise me in terms of like what's gonna actually be, consumed the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
By readers. So what are you reading now? Like so you're reading an April 2025 book. Anything like closer? Anything September, October that you're excited about, or just like, tell us about something far, far in the future that we can dream about.
Oh, this is like 5 books ago, but Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato. It's still rolling around in my head. It was so incredible, disgusting, just like really, it's coming in January 2025. Okay. She wrote Mrs. March, if you remember Mrs. March, which was also a wonderful book about a author's wife who slowly goes insane and thinks that he murdered a woman. And they live in New York, and it's a very like New York-y kind of novel. There's ambiguity about when it takes place. It kind of feels like maybe it's 60s, 70s. So she wrote this very like sharp, taut mystery with Mrs. March. And in this one, the protagonist, like, she's just a psychopath. Like, straight up. I love that. Yeah. Evil. One of the first sentences is, in the next 3 months, everyone in this house will be dead. Ooh. It's great. Yeah. The new Richard Powers, Playground, coming out in September.
Yep,
like, everyone's very stoked for the Sally Rooney, which I understand. Yes. Yeah. However, I think we have another Pulitzer. Oh, great! Yeah, do you kind of just
knock on
notice
wood?
That? I don't want to for real say, but like my gut is saying that he could be a prize-winning author again. Yeah. Which he already is a prize-winning author. And it's already been longlisted for Booker.
Booker came out. Yep. Oh, yay.
And I'm going to do a tiny plug, if that's all right. I started a queer book club in Jersey City.
Oh, great.
It's on Instagram, JC Queer Book Club.
Great.
We meet the first Sunday of every month. Nice. For October, we're reading Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt. It's a trans book about like the people who TERFs actually do have brainworms in the book. So it's kind of like, also horror adjacent. Yep. And someone in the club recommended The Death of Vivek O.G. So we're going to be reading that for November. It's been great fun. It's been very satisfying to meet with other people in Jersey City. I just like was tired of searching for a book club that was queer and like having to go to like Brooklyn for it. Because I'm like, there are queer people in New Jersey too, people.
There are, yeah.
Like, and it's hot fiction right now too. Anyways.
Good. Yeah.
So
I love it.
But how about you? What are you?
So I'm reading a nonfiction book right now.
Oh.
I just read Danzy Senna's Colored Television, which just came out this week. I'm a huge fan of Danzy Senna.
Yes.
So that was great. And I'm obsessed with her husband too, Percival Everett.
Oh, yes.
Who I did not put that together.
James.
Like James, oh my God.
Yeah.
Still think about that book all the time. Yeah. So I loved Colored Television, but now I'm reading The Barn by Wright Thompson. He wrote, I'm going to butcher this, but I think it was called Pappyland. And so this is actually kind of uncovering all of the conspiracies to cover up what actually happened in Emmett Till's murder.
Oh,
so he grew up in the South, in that county. And so the barn is actually the place where Emmett Till was murdered. And there's multiple, witness suppression, and nobody knows how many people were there. I mean, so he's like really slowly uncovering what actually like doing the research of what actually happened and who was there and who was responsible for what. And
very powerful.
Yeah, and he's just like, it is actually really important to know this now, even though it feels like that's a topic that's been done. But he said oftentimes down in his hometown, you say Emmett Till and nobody knows who you're talking about. So I'm really excited for that. That comes out end of September. And I don't often read nonfiction, but I was an African-American studies major. And so this is like exactly up my alley. It's like African-American history, Black history. So I'm digging into that, and I'm actually going to finish a nonfiction book that I think it's my first one this year.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to read, and it's, no, it's not August, it's September, but I'm trying to read
Just
only
barely.
a month or two ahead of time and kind of like forecast my list out as I meet with all the reps.
Yeah.
So that I'm not reading, like James, I read too early and it was like breaking my brain thinking about it by myself.
Yeah.
I was like, I need somebody to talk to. And I finally got my husband to read it when he had some time. And I was like, thank God I can talk to somebody about it. So I'm trying to like keep it close to the release date so then I don't have to hold it in my mind for too long. But that takes some strategy. So
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming out and chatting with us.
This was fun. Thank you so much
really
for the
fun.
invitation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I love talking about this special, blessed little job that I get to do. That I feel like truly, really blessed.
Yeah.
And so many people in my life that are important are booksellers, are people that I've made through love of bookselling specifically. Not just love of reading, love of bookselling.
Reading and bookselling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's always fun to kind of geek out with you on this kind of stuff. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
totally.
for coming out.
Thank you, Maddie and Ashanti, for this amazing talk about book buying. Listeners, you can find all the books they talked about in our show notes and at watchungbooksellers.com.
Before we go, let me quickly highlight a few of our many upcoming events. Tonight, September 17th, we're kicking it back to the 70s with Frank DeCaro, author of Disco, The Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirror Ball. Frank is a writer and performer who spent 6 years on The Daily Show. Don't miss this fun and fascinating talk. And on Thursday, September 19th, we're partnering with Benai Cachette to host Joshua Leifer, author of Tablets Shattered, The End of an American Jewish Century and the Future of Jewish Life. He'll be in conversation with the Forward Editor-in-Chief, Jody Rudoran.
Next week, Tuesday, September 24th, we're hosting Honor Moore to talk about her memoir, The Termination, and raise some funds for Planned Parenthood. Wednesday, the Montclair Literary Festival and Montclair Public Library host Nicholas Kristoff, discussing his memoir, Chasing Hope.
And Thursday, September 26th, we've got Shirley Jackson award-winning author Sophie White and our former guest Laura Sims to talk about Sophie's truly creepy book, Where I End. Sophie has an awesome podcast, too, called The Creep Dive.
We've got something for everyone this fall, so make sure to check out all of our events in our newsletter, show notes, or at watchungbooksellers.com. The Watchung Booksellers podcast is produced by Catherine Council and Marnie Jessup and is recorded at Silverstream Studio in Montclair, New Jersey. The show is edited by Catherine Council and Brie Testa. Special thanks to Timmy Kaleni and Derek Mathias. Original music is composed and performed by Violet Mujica. Art and design and social media by Evelyn Moulton. Research and show notes by Caroline Shurtleff. Thank you to the staff at Watchung Booksellers and the Kids Room for all their hard work and love of books.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, and share it. You can follow us on social media at Watchung Booksellers. And if you have any questions or ideas, you can reach us at wbpodcast@watchungbooksellers.com.
We'll see you next time. Until then, for the love of books, keep reading.